Let's talk about the decisions that you make. Most importantly, let's talk about the ranking of the different criteria that you have when you make decisions. So anytime you make a decision, there's a whole bunch of things that go into that. And you have a ranking system. You may not realize it, but you have certain things that are more important to you than others. So one of them may be cost. I had a boss once who this was his number one criteria in every single decision. What will it cost us? And what ended up happening is, because of that hurt us time after time after time, because we weren't giving the very best we could. We were giving the cheapest that we could, and it showed. Next, amount of time and effort that it will take to do this thing that we're talking about. Next is, how busy are we? We're really busy, and so we need to do the minimal amount of work to do this particular process. Next, it may be, what's the perceived value? If we add an extra $10 into the packaging of this, will it help sell more stuff? Will people look at it and say, this is worth more because of the extra value that went into the packaging? Some people place a really heavy emphasis on the competition. What's the competition doing? We don't want to go much beyond them, or we don't want to do much below them. So all those are important factors, and every one of them will have times where they become very, very important. But I believe there is one factor which is the most important one. And if you always have this one factor be the most important one in all your considerations, you'll be better off as a company when you do it. That most important factor is this: what's best for your customer? If you design it so that the customer is the center of every single decision, and we always at least consider what's best for the customer. Now, sometimes what's best for the customer may cost like 3 times as much as all the other ones. And so sometimes you have to compromise and you have to come back. But remember, I'm talking about prioritization of the factors. Choose what's most important to you, and I suggest that should be what's most important for the customer. So let's go back to the example I gave earlier of the company that cost was always the most important factor. Okay, so it was a publishing company. And so what we tended to do was do the least expensive cover for the book. So oftentimes that meant we published 1 or 2 colors on the cover. Well, that cost us, because when people look at the book, they say, this looks like a cheap book. I don't want to buy it. They don't even look inside to see the quality of what's there, because they're turned off by what's on the outside. So one of the things that I did when I became marketing director for that company is I said, let's do 4 color pictures, regular like photography pictures on the front covers of the books. And immediately sales went up as a result. Yes, it cost us a little bit more, but that cost was easily made up because that was what was right for the customer. The customer wanted a better idea of what was in that book, and they got it by looking at that cover. I suggest if you make this apply throughout your business, in every single decision you make, from marketing to packaging to how things are delivered to how things are scheduled to what your course portal looks like. Anytime you have something where it would hurt the customer to do it that way, you should be asking yourself, is this the right decision? Because it's hurting my customer. Reverse that process and say, what can I do to help my customer the most? And what ends up happening is you end up with a better relationship with your customer long term. I believe that someone should be the advocate for your customer in every single decision conversation that's made. I far too oftentimes find myself in a situation where people are talking about all the different options, and I say, wait a minute, what's best for the customer? And that's the first time anyone's thought in that conversation. And it's like, hey, everyone, this should be the number one thing that we ask ourselves that question of. Sometimes the answer to that is not going to be the cheapest or the easiest. But I firmly believe that if you do this over and over again, it will pay you back. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you should be the most expensive, the most time consuming, you don't need to do that every single time. But if you do it most of the time, what ends up happening is that people can tell whose interest you really have at heart. And they reward you accordingly. May I suggest you strongly look at the last 10, 20 decisions you made in your company and ask yourself, were they right for the customer? Could I change them so they become more right for the customer? And who in my company is advocating for the customer? And is the customer's needs and wants brought up in every single conversation about what we're doing? Every single decision is based upon that. Do that. You'll be bigger, faster, and better. What's your thought? Have you tried this? Has it ever backfired on you? Or what's your experience? Let me know in the comments. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.